The U.S. Agency for International Development has faced scrutiny over various expenditures deemed questionable or wasteful. Below is a list of such expenditures. 1. Funding to Wuhan Lab. Approximately $1 million was allocated to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for research purposes. 2. Aid to terrorist-linked groups. Around $9 million in humanitarian aid reportedly ended up in the hands of violent terrorist organizations. 3. Moroccan pottery classes. $2 million was spent on pottery classes in Morocco. 4. Trips to Lebanon. Approximately $2 million funded trips to Lebanon. 5. Sesame Street in Iraq. $20 million was allocated to create a Sesame Street program in Iraq. 6. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives. $75 million was spent on DEI initiatives in foreign countries, including $16.8 million to support equitable outcomes in Vietnam, $8.3 million for equity and inclusion education, $7.9 million to teach Sri Lankan journalists to avoid binary gender language, $6.3 million to study men having sex with men in South Africa, $6 million to advance LGBTQ principles in priority countries worldwide, $5.5 million to promote LGBTQ causes in Uganda, $3.9 million to promote LGBTQ causes in the Western Balkans, $2.5 million to promote inclusion in Vietnam, $2 million for sex changes and LGBTQ activism in Guatemala, $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbian workplaces, $70,000 for a DEI-themed musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. 7. Electric vehicles in Vietnam. $2.5 million was allocated for electric vehicles in Vietnam. 8. Tourism in Egypt. $6 million was spent to fund tourism initiatives in Egypt. 9. Personalized contraceptives. Funding was provided to print personalized contraceptive birth control devices in developing countries. 10. Meals to Al-Qaeda-affiliated fighters. Nearly $10 million was spent on meals that ended up with Al-Qaeda-affiliated fighters in Syria. 11. Funding to EcoHealth Alliance. Millions were allocated to EcoHealth Alliance, which was involved in research at the Wuhan lab. 12. Overbilling by contractors. USAID's contractor, Chemonix, faced accusations of overbilling and providing kickbacks to terrorists, resulting in a $3.1 million settlement. 13. Forced sterilizations in Peru. During the 1990s, USAID was implicated in the forced sterilization of approximately 300,000 indigenous women in Peru. 14. Funding to terrorist-linked nonprofit. In 2021, USAID awarded $110,000 to Helping Hand for Relief and Development, a charity accused of having ties to terrorist organizations in South Asia. 15. Political interference in Brazil. USAID was accused of trying to influence political reform in Brazil in a way that would have purposely benefited right-wing parties. 16. Undermining governments in Latin America. The agency has been criticized for funding efforts to undermine governments in Bolivia and Venezuela. 17. Cuban Twitter program. USAID secretly created a social media platform called Zanzunio to stir unrest and undermine the Cuban government. 18. Funding to insurgent groups in Iraq. In Iraq, USAID funded $644 million to IRD to implement the Community Stabilization Program, where millions of dollars may have been siphoned off by insurgents. 19. Overbilling by International Relief and Development, Inc. IRD charged the U.S. government $1.1 million for staff parties and retreats at exclusive resorts. 20. Funding the Taliban in Afghanistan. IRD was accused of paying bribes or protection money to the Taliban during its work in Afghanistan. 21. Funding for political activities in Serbia. USAID funded a $200 million program in Serbia aimed at increasing civic participation, which faced criticism for lack of oversight and sustainability.